Some nights don't just hurt, they rearrange you. The kind of night where your stomach drops, your face burns, and you realize the people who are supposed to protect you are the ones tightening the rope. I'm talking about the moment your own parents decide your shame is discipline and your relatives sit there like it's dinner theater. All because of a prank that lasted seconds. But the humiliation was built to last. Before we step into this story, let's do it with a little quiet. Not to cheer for anyone's downfall, not to throw stones, not to crown villains and move on. Just enough stillness to notice how cruelty can hide behind smiles. And how survival sometimes starts with one person finally saying, "Stop." Because the night my family tied me up in front of everyone, I thought that was the end of me. Then the front door slammed open. My rich uncle walked in, took one look at the rope on my wrists, and did something so calm, so final, the whole room went silent. And what happened next didn't just change that night. It changed my life. Before I share the story, I want to know you are here with me. Just say listening in the comments or tell me where you're watching from. I love hearing how far my story can reach. Sometimes even the smallest connection can make a story feel heard. Thank you. And now, here's my story. Also, if you can hit subscribe. I'm not telling this for pity, but because I spent years feeling invisible in my own family, and knowing you're here helps more than you think. My name is Rook Alden, and this is what really happened that night. I showed up to the Alden family gathering because my mother said it would be just dinner. Her tone carried that gentle threat of guilt she'd perfected over the years, the kind that sounded sweet on the surface but left a scratch beneath the skin. Just dinner, she said, so your father can stop telling people you're hiding. And so I went. I was 30, jobless again, couch surfing just outside Chicago, and this house in Naperville with its polished hardwood floors, oil paintings of dead relatives, and steak dinners cooked by hired help still knew how to make me feel 12. They called it family night, but it always felt like a performance. The house smelled like meat and wine and fake peace. The couches were packed with relatives wearing fake smiles and overpriced blazers, trading stories about stocks, their church committees, and whose child got into what Ivy League program. I stayed near the wall beside a decorative plant and a tray of untouched asparagus, trying not to make eye contact with anyone unless absolutely necessary. Carter, my little brother, the golden boy, was already in rare form, drifting between groups with that casual smirk he wore like armor. I could tell he'd clocked me the second I walked in. He didn't say anything, just gave me a look that said, "You really showed up, huh?" My father, Trent, stood at the center of it all like a politician at his own fundraiser. He didn't acknowledge me at first. That was his favorite move, pretending I wasn't there until he could weaponize the moment I was. And when he finally did glance my way, it was a half-second of cold calculation. I wasn't there as a guest. I was the inconvenient son, too loud, too off-script, too me. And yet I brought something. A little envelope, a stupid joke. A fake check labeled as a family fund inheritance draft printed on thick paper from a novelty website. It wasn't elaborate, just one sheet of joke font and a forged Alden crest in the corner. My plan: drop it in front of the table, laugh, and diffuse the tension with 10 seconds of harmless satire. We'd all move on. That's what I told myself. But deep down, I wanted something more. Maybe if I could make them laugh just once, they'd see me as part of them again. Not the problem, not the disappointment, just a damn Alden. I should have known better. I waited until dessert. People were looser by then, some even unbuttoned their blazers. The cousins were finally off their phones. I slipped the envelope from my jacket and said, "Hey, this came in the mail, something about the Alden Family Fund." My tone was dry, playful. I expected a few chuckles, a groan, maybe even a sarcastic clap. But Janelle, my mother's cousin and the human embodiment of a Facebook comment section, snatched it out of my hand and read it out loud. Her voice rose like she was reading a will in a soap opera. The Alden family inheritance draft allocation pending final disbursement. There was a beat of silence, then a ripple of gasps and awkward laughs. "Wait, is this real?" someone asked. Another voice from the back said, "Holy crap, this is huge." I opened my mouth to explain it was a joke. I barely got out of breath. That's when my father stood up, slowly, calmly, like a dam about to break. "Rook," he said loud enough to cut through every voice in the room. "Stand up." Just like that, the room shifted. Conversations died. Heads turned. Janelle backed away like she'd found a snake in the envelope. I stood. Not because I wanted to, but because I knew if I stayed seated, he'd make a scene even worse. My knees locked. My palms sweat. Carter leaned against the fireplace, arms crossed, eyes burning into me with a kind of smug readiness. This wasn't a dinner anymore. This was a trial. And I was the defendant. He made me stand under the chandelier right where the light hit hardest, like a spotlight. I could see every pair of eyes on me, some wide, some narrowed, some avoiding altogether. The silence was heavier than anything I'd felt all night. "What exactly did you think this was?" My father asked, his voice low, but sharp. "Do you think we're a joke?" I opened my mouth. "It was just a no," he snapped. "It wasn't just anything. You humiliated this family. You embarrassed your mother. In front of everyone." Trent, Mom said beside him, her voice deceptively soft. "He does this every time. He doesn't care how this makes us look." She wasn't angry. She was disappointed. And she wanted everyone to see it. I looked at the envelope in Janelle's hand, then back at Carter, whose smile had faded into something closer to concern or calculation. He didn't look amused anymore. He looked like he knew what was coming next and didn't want to be associated with it. It hit me then. The prank wasn't the problem. The problem was what the envelope said. The Alden family fund, something real, something sensitive, something I wasn't supposed to know about. And Janelle had read it like she knew exactly which part would set him off. Did she know? Had Carter tipped her off, or was it just luck? Either way, it didn't feel like an accident anymore. My father turned and walked to the far corner of the room toward the hallway closet. I felt something cold start to gather in my chest. He bent down and pulled something from inside. A cord. A thick, twisted rope from the garage. He didn't explain. He didn't threaten. He just brought it back to the center of the room and pointed at the wooden accent chair beside the coffee table. "Sit," he said. I froze. Dad now. I knew that tone. If I resisted, it would escalate fast. He was already setting the stage and I was the scene. I sat. The rope dropped heavy on my wrist. He didn't tie tight, but he tied deliberate, around the arms, through the back slats, a firm knot. "This," he said, turning to the room, "is what happens when you disrespect this family." Some people gasped quietly. Others shifted uncomfortably. One of my cousins laughed, then choked on it when my father glared in their direction. My mom stepped closer. "This is how you learn, Rook," she said. "Sometimes you have to be shown what you are." I didn't move. I didn't speak. I just stared straight ahead as the heat flooded my ears and my face burned. Across the room, Tessa, our cousin with a phone always in hand, was already filming. I caught her reflection in the window pane behind her. The camera was angled low but not hidden. I looked down. My wrists itched under the cord. I didn't struggle. That would have made it worse. They wanted to see me squirm. They wanted to see me crack. But I wouldn't give them that. And still my mind started spiraling. Why now? Why this? Why did they feel the need to take it this far in front of everyone? Then I remembered bits of conversations from dinner. Whispers about deals falling through. My father repeating the word liquidity like a nervous tick. People were asking questions about the Alden family's finances. That envelope didn't embarrass him. It exposed him. They didn't tie me up because of a prank. They tied me up because I'd touched something fragile and because punishing me publicly gave them back the control they thought they lost. A heavy silence settled again. Then the door flew open. The wind from outside cut into the heat of the room. A man stepped inside, his shoes echoing on the wood. The noise froze everything. I didn't even need to turn to know who it was. It was my uncle. And everything, every smirk, every fake laugh, every smug look disappeared in an instant. The moment the front door swung open and I saw who stepped inside, every nerve in my body fired at once. It was him. Gideon Blackwell, my mother's brother, my uncle. The kind of man who didn't need to be announced. His presence announced itself. He hadn't shown up at a family event in nearly a decade, and yet the second he walked in, the air in the room shifted like pressure before a storm. He wore a dark charcoal suit and no tie, his collar open just enough to look comfortable but sharp. He didn't carry a coat or a gift, no casseroles or bottles of wine like the rest of them brought. What he brought was far heavier silence, a silence that stretched so tight across the room no one dared speak. Even the fake laughters and passive chatter died the second his shoes touched the hardwood floor. My father, still standing over me with the rope in his hand, seemed to puff up instinctively as if trying to remind himself that this was his house. He squared his shoulders and attempted the voice of command again. "Gideon," he said, "this is family business. You've come at a—" But Gideon didn't even glance at him. His eyes locked directly on mine, more accurately on the rope binding my wrists to the armrests of that chair. His voice was low, colder than I'd ever heard it even growing up. What the hell is happening here? That one sentence sliced the room in half. Not a question about the prank. Not a word about the fake check or some scolding about family respect. No. He saw a man tied up in the middle of his own family and asked the question no one else had the guts to raise. My mother, who had been standing behind my father with her arms crossed like a passive spectator, paled. Her lips tightened, but she said nothing. Carter, leaning against the fireplace earlier with his usual amused detachment, stepped away from the wall. He didn't smirk this time. He looked like he was recalculating something in his head. "This is a discipline issue," my father said stiffly. "It's handled." "Really?" Gideon said, still staring at me. Then he shifted his attention slowly to my father. "You call this discipline?" "She humiliated this family," my father barked, gesturing to me as if I wasn't even there. "He made a joke about our finances, in front of the entire family." "You weren't here," Gideon cut him off with a slow, deliberate reach into his jacket. For one tense second I thought he might be going for something far more dramatic. But what he pulled out was his phone. Without a single word to my father, he placed a call. It rang once. "This is Gideon Blackwell," he said. "Effective immediately, freeze all disbursements and pause all partnership obligations tied to Trent Alden." "Yes." "Pending internal review. I'll follow up in the morning." He hung up. That was it. No explanation, no shouting, no raised fists. The effect was immediate. My father's face went pale, then red, then back to pale. Around the room, a few relatives stiffened, one of them audibly gasping. The younger cousin by the staircase actually stepped backward. Everyone knew what that meant. Trent Alden, Mr. Powerhouse of Naperville, wasn't standing on his own. He was propped up by something bigger. And that something had just walked into the room and kicked one of the legs out from under him. Gideon walked across the room unhurried and stood in front of me. Up close, he didn't ask again. He just scanned my face. "You okay?" I nodded, even though my throat felt like it was filled with glass. He turned to my father. "Untie him." There was a moment, a long moment, where I swear I saw something I never expected in my dad's eyes: hesitation. Fear. Still, he walked over, fumbled with the knots, and undid the rope. My wrists were red and sore skin starting to welt, but I didn't care. I stood slowly, trying not to stumble. Gideon didn't touch me, didn't hover. He just said one sentence, calm and final. "Go get your things. You're leaving tonight." I paused, and in that pause I looked around the room. At my mother, who was biting her lower lip hard enough to draw blood. At Carter, whose expression had gone unreadable. And then it clicked. Carter wasn't shocked that Gideon had showed up. He was nervous about why he was here. It wasn't just about the prank. Someone had known this night would spiral out of control, and someone had wanted me right at the center of it. As I turned to head upstairs, I caught one last detail. Tessa, my cousin, quickly sliding her phone into her coat pocket. She'd recorded it, the whole thing. The rope, the humiliation, the arrival of Gideon, all of it. The silence behind me as I walked up the stairs wasn't relief, it was fear. And right before I reached the top step, Gideon's voice called after me, steady, cold. "From this moment forward, no one in this house lays a finger on him. Not unless they want to deal with me." I came back down the stairs 15 minutes later, dragging a single suitcase behind me. The wheels clacked against the hardwood like a warning shot. The silence from earlier hadn't broken. No one moved. No one dared. My father stood near the entrance to the dining room, arms folded, jaw tight, but he didn't say a word. Not to me. Not to Gideon. My mother, standing further back, had a look in her eyes I couldn't quite read. Part fury, part loss, part something I think might have been fear. Not fear for me. Fear of what losing control looked like. Gideon didn't say much. He didn't need to. Just standing there was enough. He positioned himself by the front door like a sentry, calm and still, and everyone in the house knew the message: I was no longer unprotected. As I walked past Carter, he leaned in just enough for me to hear him whisper, "Don't trust him completely." His voice was low, almost too low. I didn't stop walking, but that one sentence lodged in my brain like a shard of glass. Why say that now? What did he know? What did he think? I didn't get the chance to ask, because just as I reached the front steps, I saw the glow of Tessa's phone screen again fading as she stuffed it back into her coat. That video existed. It wasn't just a memory anymore. It was a file, a clip, a potential weapon, or a time bomb. Outside, the air was sharp and cold. The night in Naperville was quiet in that fake suburban way where everything looks perfect but nothing feels real. Gideon opened the car door for me, and I slid into the passenger seat without a word. As he walked around the front, I looked back toward the house. I expected someone to stop us, to yell something, to make one last move. They didn't. Instead, as Gideon stepped into the driver's seat, he looked toward the house. His face didn't change, but his voice carried through the car loud and clear. "If anyone sends or spreads that video, I'll come after them with the law and with money. Your choice." It wasn't a threat. It was a statement of fact. And that was the moment the entire family backed off. Not because of morals, not because they saw the error of their ways, but because Gideon had turned their little humiliation game into a legal and reputational landmine. The ride back to Chicago was quiet. The city lights rolled past like streaks in a painting. I stared out the window, waiting for Gideon to say something. He didn't ask why I made the prank, or whether I thought it was funny, or if I regretted it. He asked only one thing: "How long have they been doing this to you?" I didn't answer. Not really. I gave him the safest answer I could. "A while. Years," he said. I nodded. And that was it. But then Gideon said something that froze my blood. "I didn't just stop by tonight, I came because I got a message, anonymous. Said, they're planning to humiliate him tonight, badly." I turned toward him slowly. "Someone warned you?" He nodded once. "Yeah. Which means someone in that house saw this coming, and they didn't stop it. They sent me instead." I felt like I was spiraling again. Carter, Tessa, Janelle. Each had their own reasons, their own stakes. Any one of them could have tipped Gideon off, but none of them tried to stop it directly. We pulled into the underground garage of Gideon's high-rise on the Gold Coast. His penthouse smelled of wood polish and jasmine tea. The contrast was overwhelming. Too clean, too quiet. He pointed to the guest bedroom. "You'll stay here tonight. Rest. We'll talk tomorrow." I nodded and stepped into the room, closed the door, leaned back against it. For a moment I felt like I could breathe. But then Carter's words came back. "Don't trust him completely." And that's when I found it. A folded scrap of paper in the inside pocket of my coat, one I didn't remember putting there. One line written in black ink. "If you want to know why your dad panicked, ask about the Blackwell Fund." My stomach dropped. What was the Blackwell Fund? And why did it scare the man who spent his life trying to control everything? I stood there, in the dark, fingers tightening around the note, heart pounding. Whatever this was, it wasn't over. It had just begun. The next morning, I woke up to the smell of fresh coffee and something faintly herbal, maybe rosemary or thyme. The apartment was quiet. Almost too quiet after everything that had happened. I stepped out into the kitchen to find Gideon already seated at the counter, scrolling through a financial paper, sipping black coffee like it was just another Tuesday. He didn't glance up. Coffee's fresh. Oat milk in the fridge if you take it. That was it. No dramatic questions. No how are you holding up, just the calm, unbothered energy of someone who knew exactly what game was being played and refused to act like we were losing. I sat down across from him, still feeling the raw imprint of the rope around my wrists. My fingers curled around the mug. He slid toward me more for grounding than for the caffeine. "You can stay here as long as you need," he said, finally, eyes still on the page. "But if you're gonna stay, you're not hiding. You're rebuilding, on your own terms." I stared at the steam rising from my mug, then asked the question that had been clawing at the back of my throat since last night. "What's the Blackwell Fund?" That was when he looked at me. He didn't flinch, didn't look surprised. He simply set the paper down and met my eyes. "Where did you hear that?" I pulled the scrap of paper from my hoodie pocket, unfolded it, and laid it on the table. Gideon's expression didn't change, but his jaw tightened just slightly. He exhaled through his nose. "Your dad's been using the Blackwell name in parts of my investment portfolio for years to get deals, loans, clout. People hear the name Blackwell and assume backing. He leveraged that. Quietly." I blinked. "And you let him?" "I didn't let him," he said, his tone hardening. "I tolerated it for your mother. But he crossed the line when he turned that house into a damn courtroom and tied you to a chair." I tried to swallow, but my mouth was dry. "So when you said last night that if his reputation falls, everything falls with it," he finished. "Because Trent Alden doesn't have assets. He has image. And image runs on borrowed power." I leaned back, dizzy from the implications. "Is that why you're helping me?" "I'm helping you," he said, "because I've been watching this mess for years. And I stayed quiet too long. Your mother plays victim every time someone steps in, makes it impossible to interfere. But last night wasn't impulsive, was it?" He pulled up something on his phone and slid it across the counter to me. A still frame from a security cam, the living room. Empty except for the rope already laid out on the couch cushion. I stared at it. They brought it in, before I even arrived. He nodded. They wanted a spectacle. All they needed was a trigger. I sat there, ice spreading under my skin. They hadn't overreacted. They'd planned it. My phone buzzed. A message from an unlisted number. Just a link. I clicked it before I could second-guess myself. It was a video, low quality, maybe from Tessa's phone. It had been cut down to a few short seconds, but it was enough. The image of me, tied face flushed with shame. And audio faint but clear enough. My mother's voice. "Let's see if he still thinks it's funny." I felt like vomiting. I looked up. If this gets out my work, my chances it's done. Gideon was already dialing someone. "You're not going to fight this alone." He ordered cease and desist letters on the spot, named Tessa directly. Then tapped into whatever network of digital contacts he had to flag and remove content before it could spread. "Money doesn't buy integrity," he said as he hung up, "but it buys silence. And sometimes that's enough." I stared at him. "You're not like I remember." He raised a brow. "You remembered me as what I don't know," I said. "A shadow, the uncle who vanished." "I didn't vanish," he said. "I watched. Because no one else would." Later that afternoon, he handed me a business card. "Therapy," he said. "Start this week." I laughed, awkward. "You serious, dead?" he replied. "You're not weak for needing help. You're smart for realizing you can't think your way out of trauma." I didn't argue, though. Every instinct in me itched to say something dismissive. To minimize it. That night I lay on the couch, flipping my phone over in my hands again and again. It rang around midnight, an unknown number. I hesitated, then picked up. No greeting. Just a pause. Then Carter's voice. "I'm not trying to ruin you," he said, low, shaky. "But I can't keep bailing you out either." "Bailing me out," I hissed. "You stood there." "I know. But you don't understand what's going on. It's bigger than you." The call disconnected. And just like that, the line between family and enemy blurred again. I sat stiffly on the leather couch in Dr. Rowan Pierce's office, staring at a bookshelf lined with framed diplomas and soft-colored abstract art. The room smelled like citrus and eucalyptus, nothing like a therapist's office should smell if you believed TV dramas. I couldn't unclench my hands, not even when she gently offered me tea. "I'm fine," I muttered, lying. "You're allowed not to be," she replied. We started with basics: how I slept, how long I'd lived in Chicago. Then she asked what brought me here. I told her about the rope, the family, the prank. I told it like a reporter, like it had happened to someone else, somewhere else. "When was the last time you felt that humiliated?" she asked. The question gutted me. Suddenly, I wasn't in the penthouse anymore. I was 15, my dad yelling at me for spilling juice in front of guests, my mom saying loudly to my aunt, "He's just not built like Carter." Every time they reminded me I was a burden, every time they smiled while saying it. "They've been doing this to me my whole life," I said. That rope was just the most honest they've ever been. We mapped it out, me, my dad, my mom, Carter. My father used shame and fear. My mother used guilt and emotional debt. Carter learned to survive by performing for them. He made jokes so they wouldn't make him the joke. I mentioned what Carter had whispered: "Don't trust Gideon completely." Dr. Pierce didn't flinch. "You can be rescued without becoming dependent," she said. "Just don't hand over the steering wheel again. Not to anyone. Not even someone good." That stopped me cold. I'd started trading one prison for another. Just shinier, safer. I went back to the penthouse that evening with all that buzzing in my head. Gideon was at the dining table with his laptop and 2 phones going. He didn't ask how it went. He just slid a folder toward me. Inside were lists writing residencies, online workshops, short-term freelance gigs. "You don't owe me anything," he said. "But you need your own footing, or else they'll always be right that you're dependent." I stared at the papers. "You signed me up for these." "No," he said. "I'm showing you the path. You walk it." Then I saw the email about my credit card. It had been paid in full. "Did you do this?" I asked. He didn't look up. "Yes. That balance was a leash. Trent had access to it. I cut it. You should have asked." "You're right," he said immediately. "Next time I will. Learn to say what you want, even if it's to me. Especially if it's to me." Something shifted. For the first time in my life, someone powerful did something for me and still let me push back. That night I started writing again. A short piece. Fiction, maybe. About a man bound to a chair. About a door that opened. About a silence that changed. Right as I was saving it, an email popped in. It was from my old employer. Someone had submitted a concerning tip about me. Attached was a blurry still image, me tied up. Just enough to raise questions, not enough to be legally actionable. It wasn't from Tessa. The image had been carefully cropped, intentionally ambiguous. Just enough poison to taint my name. And I knew what it meant. They weren't finished. They just moved the war from Naperville to my future. I woke up to a digital minefield. My inbox was flooded with subject lines like, "Urgent request for clarification," "Immediate action required," and concerns regarding media circulation. I scrolled through the emails one by one. Clients, editors, collaborators, each had received an anonymous submission containing a blurry still from that night. Not the full video, just a cropped frame. Just enough to cast doubt. Just enough to plant shame. They weren't asking what happened. They were asking if I was still a liability. I sat in the kitchen staring at my screen, my coffee untouched, my hands shaking slightly. I wasn't just being shamed anymore. I was being erased. Whoever sent it didn't need the full clip, just a sliver. A quiet accusation. It worked better that way, left room for speculation, for fear. This wasn't just about silencing me. It was about making sure I never got back up. Because if I stayed down, they stayed right. Trent stayed respectable, Mary Ann stayed the worried mother, and Carter stayed the golden boy. The email wasn't from Tessa. The cropping style, the wording, it didn't match her. I dug deeper, looked at the metadata, the language. Passive-aggressive, indirect, office trained. It smelled corporate. And then I remembered Dad's former assistant, the one who always rolled her eyes at me, who once told me I was lucky my last name got me through doors I didn't deserve. She had access. She had motive. She had loyalty to Trent. I wasn't ready to accuse her, but I had a lead, a direction, and I brought it straight to Dr. Pierce. I expected her to tell me to fight fire with fire. Instead, she told me to build a case. Your anger is valid, she said, but you win by being methodical, not impulsive. Make it undeniable. Then let the system do the punishing. That afternoon, Carter called. His voice was clearer this time, sharper. They planned it, he said. Tessa and Janelle brought it up to Mom, said you needed a wake-up call. Mom agreed, said it was time to break you in. I closed my eyes. She really said that. She said she was tired of you embarrassing the family, Carter murmured. Dad didn't say much, but when I left the room he was on the phone with someone. I think it's about that loan, the one tied to Gideon's name. And then he said the part that locked it all together. He's not scared of losing you. He's scared of losing his funding. If Gideon cuts him off, the whole thing collapses. The rope, the video, the smear campaign. It wasn't punishment. It was strategy. They needed me humiliated, neutralized, erased. I didn't hide, not this time. Gideon and his legal team helped me draft a formal response for every company and client who had reached out. I attached a statement I had been the victim of a coordinated act of family violence. The incident had been recorded without consent and was now being weaponized to jeopardize my career. Legal measures were in motion. I offered video calls to explain. I didn't beg for understanding. I made it clear I would not be silent. Most of the replies were cautious but respectful. A few pulled back. But one, the biggest contract on the table, said something I didn't expect. We appreciate your transparency, but we need to know this won't spiral further. If you can shut it down at the source, we'll stay in. They needed proof I could protect my name, not just survive the fire, but extinguish it. The next day I received a text from Marianne. Come home. Let's talk like a family. Just say sorry in front of everyone and we can move on. I almost laughed. That was the game. If I apologized in front of the family, it became public record that I was at fault. Every rumor, every clip, every story. Well, even he admitted it. One sentence would grant them social immunity. I didn't ignore the invitation. I accepted it. But I didn't go alone. Gideon came with me. So did his lawyer. I didn't go to bow my head. I went to put the truth on the table. We were almost out the door when my phone buzzed. No name, no message, just a file, an audio clip. I pressed play. 2 voices. Marianne. Let's see if he's still laughing after this. Janelle. Don't worry. Someone's filming. Hit him hard. My blood turned to ice. This wasn't carelessness. This was intent. I tucked the phone into my coat and got into the car. The seatbelt clicked shut like a final decision. This time I wasn't trembling with fear. This time I was trembling with resolve. Naperville hadn't changed. Not the smell of overcooked ham in the entryway. Not the dim hallway lighting. Not the way the walls seemed to lean in like they were listening. But I had. The house buzzed with faux normalcy. Trent pretended to be distracted by sports on the TV. Marianne offered sweet tea with a soft, martyred smile. Tessa and Janelle sat on the couch together, legs crossed like sentries. Carter hovered near the dining room, his grip on his glass too tight, his eyes avoiding mine. We all knew this wasn't a reconciliation. It was a staging. Marianne started the script. All you have to do is apologize, Rook. 1 sentence. In front of the family. Trent folded his arms. You embarrassed me. You embarrassed this family. You owe us. I looked at each of them. Let them believe I was about to cave. Then I spoke. I'm not here to apologize for being tied to a chair. You could have heard a pin drop. I'm not here to beg for forgiveness, I said. I'm here to say this ends today. That night was abuse, and pretending otherwise won't save any of you. Shock, disgust, silence. Then, Gideon placed a folder on the table. Inside legal letters, warning notices, a cease and desist for Tessa and Janelle, a liability briefing for Marianne and Trent, a document terminating all partnerships and support involving the Alden name. No one breathed. You weaponized humiliation, Gideon said coolly. Now it has consequences. Then I pulled out my phone. The audio played loud and clear. Marianne. Let's see if he's still laughing after this. Janelle. Don't worry, someone's filming. Marianne's face drained of color. That's fake. That's edited. Gideon didn't blink. We can let the digital forensic team decide. For the first time, the crowd around the table turned not toward me, but toward her. Toward Trent. Toward the people who had orchestrated it all. Then Carter stood. He didn't look at me. He looked at the floor. I knew she was filming, he said. I didn't stop it. I was scared they'd turn on me next. His voice cracked. I'm sorry, Rook. I knew it was wrong. I just didn't want to be next. Something in the room broke. The golden sun had broken ranks. I looked at my parents. You sent that clip out to destroy my name. It almost worked. But if anything else leaks, if anything else even tries to mess with my career, you won't just be dealing with lawyers. You'll be dealing with the law. Trent opened his mouth. I cut him off. I'm not here to win your approval. I'm not here to earn your love. I'm here to reclaim what's mine, my life. Gideon stood beside me. Family doesn't use shame as discipline, he said. And if you believe otherwise, you deserve exactly what's coming. We left. No goodbyes, no promises, just finality. Later that night, I submitted my manuscript draft to the workshop. It opened with a single image, a man tied to a chair in front of people who once called him family. It ended with that man cutting the rope himself. Not with rage, but with clarity, because the end didn't come when they apologized. It came when I stopped needing them to. When I look back on that night, I don't remember the rope first. I remember the silence in the room. The kind of silence that tells you exactly where you stand. And maybe that's what stayed with me the most, how easy it is for cruelty to wear a familiar face, and how hard it is to admit you've been shrinking for years, just to keep the peace. But if there's one thing this story left me with, it's this: sometimes the ending we fear is really just the moment we finally stop negotiating our own worth. And I think that's where we meet each other. Because a lot of us know what it feels like to be talked over, blamed, or made small in a place that's supposed to feel like home. We don't have to judge anyone to recognize the damage, and we don't have to carry it alone to prove we're strong. If you're still here with me, thank you for listening. If you'd like to be part of this little corner where stories get told gently and honestly, I'd love for you to subscribe, not as a favor, but as a way to join a community that listens and understands. And if you feel like it, drop a few words in the comments where you're watching from or what part of this hit close to home. I read more than you think. Take care of yourself, and I'll see you in the next story.